I was famously wrong with Treylon Burks. I apologize to the masses. When I fixed it and used 3-year eligible declare for like first time eligible declare, Treylon Burks sophomore comps go from like completely mediocre to completely incredible. Now we have DeAndre Hopkins and Calvin Johnson and Tyler Lockett and Kenny Britt and Sidney Rice and Santonio Holmes and DJ Moore and Christian Kirk, who nearly had a top 12 season, by the way. Devin Funchess, Marquise Brown, all of these guys have hit. There is one blemish on the Treylon Burks sophomore comps list. It is Ruben Randall, who did not hit and is unlikely to hit in the future, considering he was drafted in 2012. He doesn't play in the NFL in a great many years. So basically, we're looking at a really, 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 really high probability of hitting for Treylon Burks from a historical comps perspective. Therefore, I am really liking the Treylon Burks, and I think there's, like I said, a chance that Derrick Henry breaks down and Ryan Tannehill stays put, and we get 32 pass attempts per game, which is going to be enough to propel Treylon Burks, assuming, of course, that he is good, into a high-end wide receiver 2 finish. Conversely, the sophomore comps for Christian Watson are freaking incredible, but I'm terrified of the Jordan Love scenario, and it's just going to be a hard pass. And he's going a full round earlier than Treylon Burks, so I don't know. Give me Treylon.
Well, it depends where you look. Up on Fantasy Calc World, they have Christian Watson behind Treylon Burks, but in ADP, Christian Watson goes ahead. One thing that I would say about this, maybe when the Jordan Love thing is confirmed, this will change. I think if we're forecasting August ADP, I think that this gap will continue to widen because you look at underdog drafts. Did I say underdog? Underdog drafts right now. Treylon Burks is currently a round 7-8 turn pick. His ADP is 83. Christian Watson is going at the 4 or 5 turn. His ADP is 47. So that's a pretty substantial gap in how the markets are treating these two going into next year. There's a lot of things that can change. The NFL draft. What happens to Tannehill, what happens to Rodgers, maybe that doesn't hold. But if that's how the market's perceiving it right now, it is actually surprising to me that the gap is this wide. I suppose some of that could be owing to the fact, quite fairly, that the market in general perceived of Treylon Burks as a much better prospect than Christian Watson. But I still think it's notable that there's that level of gap. I am, I think, slightly on the opposite side. I want you to really try to expand your imagination and just walk with me down this vibes train for a second, okay? So I've been I would argue I've possibly been conflicted about Treylon Burks, honestly, since February. I was I've never had a particularly settled opinion where I've been we're in on Burks or we're out on Burks. I've always been kind of a little fancy fencerton, where I was yeah, he's good, but people are a little bit too high on him. And then I was no, I like Treylon Burks, but I like Garret Wilson more. And then the season, I was yeah, no, I like Burks. And then I was and I'm kind of still there now. Here's okay, the upside you articulated, right? Sophomore comps great. I'll run through some of the metrics. He's 74.7 PFF grade. That's not certainly not as good as his top 3. It's also definitely not bad. Only 254 reps. We're working with a pretty limited sample. 1.75 yards per out run. Again, good, not legendary. 0.209 targets per out run. Good, not legendary. 0.176 target share. Good, not incredible. So it's if he was just a little bit better, vibes to the side. Here's my concern, right? I like to think about, what information do we learn with these rookies? How did we think about them going in, right? You talked about this with Chris Olave before about viewing the prospects holistically. I think we should view the context holistically too, in terms of what were the concerns we had about this player, what were the priors we had about this player, and to what elements of their profile did they disprove or prove. With Burks, it was, what were the questions that we had coming into his rookie year? One was, is he actually athletic? Because we all thought he was pretty athletic. And then at the combine, he was kind of athletic. And then 2, it was, is this guy a wide receiver or is he a gadgety player, right? Is this guy actually have the technical skill to play wide receiver? And then what we saw over the course of the year was, a guy who didn't play a full route share initially, ended up working his way up, was efficient-ish, but a lot of his production came on, not particularly developed or technical routes. He was running a lot of drag routes. He was getting some screens. He was getting some manufactured stuff. He didn't really show off that developed of a technical skill set, and he never was really that prolonged of a full-time player. And this is like a vibesy take, but I just never thought that he looked particularly sudden or dynamic or explosive. Like, I thought that he looked pretty languid when he was out there moving. Like, I never really got the feeling that when he got the ball, I was like, oh, this guy's going to take it to the house. Like, it just felt like he was kind of running until he got tackled. And I guess my concern is like how much of his rookie year, in terms of the targets that he earned, the production that he was able to put up, how he was deployed, was just indicative of confirming the things that he was already good at, and them using him that way on an offense that was entirely devoid of playmakers. And like, does this guy actually have the toolbox to be a difference maker? Or does he just have a statistical profile that resembles guys who are, which was kind of the concern that we had about his college prospect profile coming in. And I just have some lingering fear about Burks. With Christian Watson, I'll let you respond to that in a second. With Christian Watson, like, he is also very raw. And he also ran a pretty limited sample of routes. He was running a lot of jet sweeps. He was running a lot of drags. He was running a lot of go routes. But he looked freaking explosive as hell. And he was one of the most efficient rookie wide receivers we have. And that was a guy where I was like, all right, can this guy develop the technical skill to be an all-around wide receiver? I don't know. But would I still make sure to run a big portion of my offense through getting this guy the ball in space and throwing him deep routes? Like, no matter what, yes. With Burks, I could just see him getting displaced a little bit more easily because he was so reliant on being a focal point in terms of getting the ball in his hands, but he didn't do so much with the ball in his hands that makes me confident that they're going to continue to run their offense that way. Does this mean anything to you? Do you share any of these fears, or do you just live in a spreadsheet?
I obviously live in a spreadsheet, and I don't really care about wide receiver athleticism. I think that there's just different ways to win at the wide receiver position. We see unathletic players be very, very productive all the time.
Of course, but does Burks win those ways? That's like, I'm not sure that he wins the ways that unathletic. I think it matters because I'm not like, there are unathletic technicians that win in the NFL, and there are raw athletes that win in the NFL. But Treylon Burks is not a technician, and I'm not so sure he's an athlete.
Is it his open score like one of the highest in football?
I mean, I'm not particularly concerned with his open score. I'll tell you this: he is a guy that I'm very, very interested to see what Matt Harmon thinks, because Matt Harmon was not a fan of him coming out of college in terms of his reception perception. And if Matt's more impressed with what he was able to put down in rookie year, I will, like, my vibe score will go up. Like, I don't put a ton of weight on what he says for everybody, but Burks is a guy that I would care quite a bit. Like, because his open score, like in terms of how open he is, he's probably open a lot. I mean, he's running a lot of drags where they're just like running pick routes for him, and he's coming out with nobody defending him in his zone.
Yeah, I honestly don't have a take on open score. I've known nothing. I have no database involving open score whatsoever. I was just confirming my priors that he's really good. My new priors. But yeah, no, like, I guess, sure. Like, if
how about this? Just like, okay, if you don't care about the context, like, just in theory, like, does any of this stuff like map on? Like, do you have like a room in your heart for context? Is there a room in your heart for that?
I mean, there's a room in my heart for context, but at the end of the day, if he's going to get a 17.6% target share, and then all the other guys that got a 17.6% target share were good, then I don't really care that he has 17.6% target share. If we're saying that we can go back in time and, have vibes on everyone's suddenness and breaks in their routes and whatnot, then, I get, yeah, sure. If you can show me that it matters, I'm into it. We don't have that. So then it's just like, like, what is this different than like film grinding? Like, it is film grinding.
Right. Well, I mean, I think that it's important to contextualize data. Like, and I think that it's hard to, I don't think that we should view every player outside of the larger probabilistic picture that we paint by numbers and we paint by having groups and having trends. I think that that's important. But I also think that there's a degree to which we have to view each player as their own little flower and understand that the groups with which they're being associated are just a reflection of other likes. They're not actually necessarily, direct predictors of this player's success. And I think that it's a balancing act. I think that if the entire take was, I watched Burks run some routes and I think he's bad, that would be a horrific take. And I think that, just playing the averages is a better take than that. But I personally think that there's some room for exploring things a little bit further. I mean, I'm not out on Burks in the sense that I'm having a fire sale. I have a little bit of lingering fear with him that I don't have with Christian Watson. That's all. And I view this as a place where I can make this pivot pretty cheaply for a guy that I think has a pretty similar numerical profile without some of the vibesy film context concerns.
So like PFF watches every play, and PFF says Christian Watson had a 77.8 PFF grade. And then they watched the replay of Treylon Burks, and they said he had a 73.9. And I'm sitting here looking at that and being like, those are pretty good rookie scores. Those aren't bad at all. And then again, I'm looking at, well, how did he produce on that? Like, on a per play basis, he was film scouted at this grade. On a per play basis, he was targeted at this rate by his NFL team. He was scoring points at this rate. And at the end of the day, like, if all the other guys that did that, they're
probably... What do these stats tell you, right? Like, what does a PFF grade actually tell you?
Tells me that somebody watched him play football and said that he was in a well above average rookie wide receiver.
But what did they watch?
What do you mean, what did they watch? They watched him play football.
Okay. What's something that you're particularly good at?
I would have said making nachos, but Luke Sawhook already beat me to that one. So
that's fine. Okay, okay, let's just use cooking. So you can make good nachos. What's something you cannot cook?
Rice.
You can't cook rice? It's not that hard. You boil water, you add the rice.
Never tastes as good as it does in the restaurants. I don't know.
Okay, that's embarrassing. But anyhow, okay, so
hard to make good rice. You kidding me?
Hard to make good rice. You just boil water. Okay, so you can make nachos, you can't make rice. Okay, so if I asked you to make, if I asked you to make 10 plates of nachos, and then I graded you on those nachos, and I called that chef grading, you'd probably have a pretty good rating.
So what you're telling me,
called that, but if I asked you to make 10 pots of rice, your chef grade would probably be a lot lower because apparently you just can't make rice. I'm just saying, like, Treylon Burks to me he's on. I'm gonna coin a new term right now. It's called the Liam Neeson spectrum. Okay, Liam Neeson is a particular set of skills, and Treylon Burks scores highly on the Liam Neeson spectrum. Right? Look at DeAndre Swift as a great example of this. He's a guy who PFF was like, oh my god, this guy's so good in 2022. Why? Because he was used according to his particular set of skills. Treylon Burks is a guy who has a particular set of skills. He was used towards them, and so I think that he reflects highly because he was doing the things that he was good at. I'm not saying he can't also be good at other things, but I have a higher level of concern regarding his ability to expand beyond his particular set of skills than I do about some other wide receivers.
So, but like Christian Watson, is he not have a particular set of skills?
I think that he is a Liam Neeson. But he is high on the Liam Neeson index, but he is Liam Neeson. Like, he has a particular set of skills, and he is the best of that particular set of skills.
He's not, though. He only scored a 77.8. He didn't even hit 80. Drake London had 85.
Well, London scores low on the Liam Neeson. He has a broad set of skills. He's not on the Liam Neeson spectrum.
What do you mean he's a broad set of skills? He hit 85 across the board, is what you're saying?
I mean, I think London can run every route in the book. Like, he's just a better player than both of these guys. Like, I'm not worried about him. Like, London, Wilson, and Olave operate on a different plane than Watson and Burks. Like, these are not guys where I'm like, oh, they're good at some things. Can they add other things? Like, those guys are already just great NFL wide receivers. Like, Burks and Watson, like, that's why they're in this tier. They're not like I mean, Dotson. Okay, Dotson would be a guy that I would say is the opposite of these guys, and that I think Dotson can do more things adequately than Treylon Burks, but he can't do a small number of things as well, if that makes sense. Like, I think if you ask, like, if you had Jahan Dotson and Treylon Burks both run the full route tree right now, Jahan Dotson, I think, is a better NFL player. But, luckily, that's not actually how real life works, and players get to be used towards their skills to some extent. Coaches aren't totally dummy. And, I think that because of what Burks brings to the table, he's a more interesting bet to me than Dotson, because I think his set of skills is more interesting. Whereas I think Dotson's more that all-around type wide receiver. But I don't know that he's like on the level of an Olave or a Wilson, where they're the same type of wide receiver, but is way better at it.
Gotcha. So then my question is, does any of that matter when it comes to scoring fantasy points? If they're just going to
I think it matters.
His role that he's good at.
Because what's the ceiling? Right, what's the ceiling? That's my concern. Is like how much better than what we saw this year are we going to get?
Calvin Johnson run.
Okay, Calvin Johnson is like whatever we just said about Christian Watson. Calvin, I mean, we're not comparing these guys to Calvin fucking Johnson.
I'm just saying, okay? Like Calvin Johnson can only run 2 fucking routes, and he's the best wide receiver in football ever.
Watch Treylon Burks and tell me if you see Calvin Johnson. That's what I'm asking. I know. Like, here's the thing: like if Treylon Burks like popped off the screen with like dynamic athleticism, where it was like, okay, this guy's a little limited, but man, he's going to take it to the house, I wouldn't give a shit. I'd be like, whatever. They're going to force feed this guy the ball. He was just languid to me. That was a concern. That's all. That's okay. Maybe it won't matter. I still have Treylon Burks. I'm not shipping him off for parts.
So it seems like you just hate Treylon Burks, your dude. You got him as tier of his own, wide receiver 1, and now you just hate him.
What is this? Okay, do we both agree though that Watson and Burks are our favorite 2 of this 5?
Yeah. Interestingly, Treylon Burks only has a 6.32 RAS score, and Christian Watson has like a 9.98.
Right, and I'll tell you what, it shows up on the screen.
Yeah, so it's not surprising to me that you're like, oh, Christian Watson looks sudden. He's fast. He's a threat to take it to the house any point in time. I would expect that, given the RAS scores.